Hi everybody, this is David Looney, and in this lecture we're going to be talking about something called textual transmission. Textual transmission is the story of how the Bible was hand copied throughout history to the point where the printing press was invented. Now, the reason we discuss the hand copying of the Bible is because we have 5,280 Greek manuscripts, and they're not exactly alike. So what I mean by that is it's kind of like a game of telephone where you tell somebody a story and then they pass it along the way. You know that the message kind of gets distorted over a period of time. Now, the same is true with written copies, especially handwritten copies. The longer something is being hand copied, like a written piece of document like the New Testament, errors are realistically they're going to creep in, and that's the situation we're in. Over the last 2,000 to 3,400 years, the Bible has been hand copied, and it is a simple matter of fact is that we don't know, or I should word it this way, that we don't have perfect copies. The 5,280 copies we have aren't perfectly unanimous as to what the wording is. So scholars are trying to figure out which words are original and which ones are not. Now, to kind of give you an example of how this affects us practically, I'm going to take here, got Logos Bible software, and I want to show you an example from Acts chapter 8. Obviously, since I've got it up here on your screen, you don't have to look it up. But here's the NLT. The NLT is a modern translation, and I want to compare it to the King James here, so you can kind of see how this impacts us in a very practical level. Here's verse 36 of chapter 8 of Acts. Just to set up the context, Philip is going around preaching the gospel, and he meets up with this guy in the chariot, this Ethiopian eunuch, and he starts preaching to him the gospel. And at this point, it seems like the eunuch believes. He actually becomes saved. And in verse 36 we pick up that while they were riding along in the chariot, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, there's some water. Why can't I be baptized?" He ordered the chariot to stop. They went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. Now, I know we're all biblical majors here, and we're not really good with numbers, but even we can see here that from 36 to 38, we're missing something. Verse 37 is completely missing. It's been omitted from the NLT. I'm going to highlight this so we can take a look at it in the King James here. Now, it's not omitted in the King James. In fact, it's present there. They once the eunuch said there's water, and he asked the question, "What's stopping me to baptize?" Instead of going direct, stopping the carriage and getting in the water and getting baptized, there's a piece of conversation that's included here that isn't in the NLT. And this is what happens. Philip said, "Sure, you can get baptized if you believe with all your heart." And the eunuch answered and said, "I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." And it's after that confession of faith that the eunuch goes and gets baptized by Philip. So as you can see, this is missing a verse, and these textual variants can get pretty messy. In fact, I'm going to give you some big examples. So I think at the outset of biblical interpretation, and I might be making a mistake by introducing this on the first night, but this is something I want to introduce to you right away so you can start thinking about it and incorporating it into your faith, because it can take a while to kind of incorporate this into your understanding of the Bible. But we don't have perfectly transmitted copies of the originals. There are some verses that were added or subtracted, and so now scholars are trying to figure out what they are. So that's why we're talking about textual transmission. Let's Let me slide this out of the way, and let's bring up the PowerPoint here. Good. So really the goal is to get as close to the original words as possible, and I think the best way of explaining to you why verses are omitted and why some are included is by looking at how the Bible was copied by hand over the centuries. And I think once you understand that process, it'll make a lot more sense why certain translations include verses and others omit them. So let's take a look at it now. First thing I need to explain is we do need scholars to we need people dedicated to helping us figure out what the original's words were. And the reason why we need that is because realistically the Bible was not perfectly preserved over the last 2,000 years. This might be kind of a shock, and you might have assumed that was true, but there are 5,280 Greek manuscripts out there, and they're not all identical. That is just the hard, cold reality. And I have some on my software here. If you need some Greek, we could bring them up and take a look at them. The absolute reality is that they're not perfectly preserved. So we do need to figure out what they are, and that's why we need to do this, why we need to look at textual transmission and textual criticism. So let's take a look at how the Bible is copied from the original author all the way down to us. And I'm going to start with, let's pretend that we're looking at the book of Acts here. Now, the book of Acts was written by a guy named Luke. So you've got Luke, and then he sits down and he writes the book of Acts. And he sends it to his favorite church. Now, the favorite church loves it so much that they make another copy and send it to another church. And then that church loves it so much they send it to another church. And each one has their own copy of the book of Acts. Now, we're going to put these churches in different parts of the Roman Empire. And each one of these churches is going to make their own copies. Okay? So, let's take a look at what that would look like. Now, you've got your Byzantine church, you've got your Western or Cesarean church, and then you've got the Alexandrian church. And you've got these three major churches all making copies of the New Testament. Keep in mind, at this point, we're just talking about the New Testament. Now, I kind of want to... the graph here is reflecting to some degree reality. I'm not just making stuff up. These are the three major textual families we have today. All the manuscripts we have basically find their roots in these three areas, and so this is reflective of reality. But you've got the Byzantine church. Now, the Byzantine church was the one that was kind of always Christian. They didn't really deal with a lot of persecution, the Holy Roman Empire and all that. So they lived under peace, and so they made a lot of copies. And in fact, the majority of the copies we have in the New Testament are Byzantine. The Western Cesarean church, we have a few of those, but nowhere near as much as the Byzantine. And finally, we have Alexandrian texts from Egypt, and we don't have very many of them, possibly because of the switch to from Greek to Coptic. I think occurred like around the 4th, 5th, or 6th century. So they switched away from Greek, and so it doesn't make sense. They kept making Greek copies. So as you can see here, this is kind of what it looks like as copies were being made by these churches over the span of the centuries. We have a few from Alexandria in the early first few centuries, a ton from the Byzantine Empire leading all the way into the development of the printing press, and a little bit to a moderate amount from the Western Caesarean family.